Ambassador Thane Blackwood stood in his destroyed living quarters, surveying the chaos that had become his daily reality. Shattered furniture lay scattered across the floor. Deep claw marks scarred the titanium walls, and what used to be an expensive diplomatic sofa now resembled confetti. This wasn't the work of enemy saboteurs or hostile aliens trying to undermine the Vorthak Empire. This was Tuesday morning with his 3 children. The ambassador rubbed his temples, feeling another headache building. His younglings weren't ordinary kids by any stretch of imagination. Each one stood nearly 8 feet tall despite being barely adolescents, their bodies rippling with muscles that could crush steel beams. Their claws could slice through battle armor like butter, and their teeth were designed for tearing through the toughest alien hide. These weren't just children. They were living weapons in training, members of a species that had conquered half the galaxy through sheer predatory dominance. Nanny number 17 had quit yesterday after young Grimm decided to practice his hunting techniques on her pet carrier. The Altarian caretaker had been highly recommended, supposedly one of the best in her field with decades of experience handling difficult children from various species. She lasted exactly 4 hours before fleeing the station in terror, leaving behind only a resignation note that simply read impossible in 17 different languages. Blackwood picked up his communication device and scrolled through the mounting list of rejection messages from childcare agencies across the sector. The Universal Nanny Service had blacklisted his family entirely. The Elite Caretakers Guild refused even return his calls. Even the military-trained babysitters from the warrior worlds had politely declined after hearing about his youngling's reputation. Time was running out fast. The peace negotiations on Kepler Station wouldn't wait for his domestic problems. 3 warring species had finally agreed to sit down and discuss ending a conflict that had raged for decades. As the Vorthak Empire's chief diplomat, his absence could mean the difference between galactic peace and another century of bloodshed. But he couldn't leave his children unsupervised, not after what happened last time when they accidentally destroyed an entire deck of the station while playing Hunt the Maintenance Droid. With no other options left, Blackwood made a decision that went against every diplomatic protocol in the book. He posted a public job listing on the station's General Employment Board, the same place where janitors and freight workers look for shifts. The compensation he offered was astronomical, enough credits to buy a small planet or retire comfortably for several lifetimes. Down in the maintenance sector of the station, Kate Mitchell wiped grease from her hands as she finished repairing another broken atmospheric recycler. Her uniform was stained with hydraulic fluid, and her back ached from crawling through ventilation shafts all morning. The job paid barely enough to cover her basic living expenses, and the mounting medical bills for her brother's treatment back on Earth were crushing her financially. During her lunch break, she checked the employment board out of habit, knowing that most postings were either too dangerous or required skills she didn't possess. But one listing made her stop chewing her sandwich entirely. The numbers didn't make sense at first. Surely someone had made a typing error. Nobody paid that kind of money for childcare work. She read the posting 3 times before the reality sank in. An ambassador needed someone to watch his kids for 2 weeks. The pay was legitimate, verified by the station's banking system. It was enough money to solve all her problems and set her up for life. Her co-workers gathered around when she showed them the listing. Bill shook his head immediately. "That's Blackwood's family," he warned. "Those aren't normal kids, Kate. They're Vorthak apex predators. I've heard stories about what happened to their previous nannies. Some needed therapy. Others changed careers entirely." The warnings kept coming. The Vorthak were legendary throughout the galaxy for their hunting prowess and aggressive nature. Their children were raised from birth to be perfect killers, trained in combat before they could properly walk. Taking this job could be signing her own death warrant. But Kate thought about her brother lying in that hospital bed, about the mounting bills, about her dead-end job fixing broken machines while barely scraping by. Sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures. She submitted her application before she could change her mind. Kate Mitchell pressed the door chime to Ambassador Blackwood's quarters, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd spent the previous night researching everything she could find about Vorthak children, though most of the information was classified or consisted of horror stories from traumatized caregivers. The few details she gathered painted a terrifying picture of young predators who viewed every interaction as either a dominance challenge or hunting practice. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Ambassador Blackwood appeared, looking haggard and desperate. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually pristine diplomatic uniform was wrinkled and stained. Behind him, Kate could hear sounds that made her stomach clench, growls, crashes, and what sounded like furniture being systematically destroyed. "Miss Mitchell, thank you for coming," Blackwood said, his voice carrying barely controlled exhaustion. "I must warn you, my children are spirited today." They seemed to sense when new caregivers are arriving. The moment Kate stepped across the threshold, the universe exploded into chaos around her. A massive chair came flying through the air, missing her head by inches before smashing against the wall where she'd been standing seconds before. The crash was immediately followed by a bone-chilling roar that seemed to vibrate through her entire body, making her teeth ache. 3 enormous shapes emerged from the shadows of the ruined living space, moving with the fluid grace of born killers despite their youth. The largest, whom she assumed was Grim, stood nearly as tall as Kate herself, his muscular frame rippling with barely contained power. His younger brothers, Talon and Fong, flanked him on either side, their bright yellow eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. They began to circle her immediately, just as she'd read about in the research files. It was classic pack hunting behavior, designed to confuse and intimidate their target before moving in for the kill. Their claws scraped against the metal floor with each step, creating an ominous scratching sound that sent shivers down her spine. Low growls rumbled from their throats, a sound that triggered every survival instinct Kate possessed. Talon suddenly lunged forward, stopping just short of her face and releasing a roar that shattered 2 drinking glasses on a nearby table. The sound was so loud and fierce that Kate felt her knees wobble, but she forced herself to stay upright. Behind her, she could hear Ambassador Blackwood muttering apologies and reaching for his communicator, probably to call security before his children accidentally killed another potential nanny. Most caregivers would have been running by now, screaming for help or cowering in terror. Kate could understand why. These weren't children in any traditional sense. They were apex predators in training, each one capable of tearing her apart without breaking a sweat. The rational part of her mind was screaming at her to flee, to admit this job was beyond her capabilities, and get out while she still could. Instead, Kate did something completely unexpected. She slowly lowered herself to the floor, crossing her legs in a comfortable sitting position right in the middle of their hunting circle. The 3 younglings paused, clearly confused by this response. Their previous nannies had either tried to assert dominance through shouting or had cowered in fear. This calm, seated human was something entirely new. From her jacket pocket, Kate pulled out a battered electronic tablet. Its screen cracked from years of use. She'd loaded it with dozens of human stories, thinking they might serve as a distraction if things got too intense. The device's speakers were small and tinny, but in the sudden quiet of confused predators, her voice carried clearly as she began to read. "Once upon a time, there were 3 bears who lived in a cottage in the woods," she said, her voice steady and warm despite her racing pulse. "There was Papa Bear, who was very big and strong, Mama Bear, who was wise and caring, and Little Baby Bear, who was small but brave." The effect was immediate and startling. The growling stopped entirely. The 3 Vorthack younglings tilted their heads in unison, their predatory circling forgotten as they tried to process these strange sounds and concepts. Kate continued reading, weaving the tale of Goldilocks and her encounter with the bear family, but she modified the story slightly, emphasizing themes of family bonds, protection, and belonging. Gradually, almost without realizing it, the 3 younglings crept closer. First Fong, the smallest, settled on his haunches about 6 feet away, his large eyes fixed on Kate's tablet. Then Talon joined him, and finally Grim, their pack leader, lowered himself to the floor just within arm's reach. Ambassador Blackwood stood frozen in the doorway, witnessing something unprecedented in Vorthack history. The morning after Kate's successful first encounter with the Vorthack younglings, she arrived at Ambassador Blackwood's quarters armed with something no previous caregiver had thought to bring: a structured daily schedule. Most nannies had approached the children like wild animals to be contained or dominated. Kate decided to treat them exactly like the human kids she'd helped raise back on Earth. "All right, everyone," she announced to the three towering predators who were already eyeing her with curiosity instead of hostility. "We'll start each day the same way. Breakfast first, then morning activities, then quiet time, then lunch." She held up a colorful chart she'd made the night before, complete with pictures and time slots. Grim, the largest of three, tilted his massive head and made a questioning growl. Kate had learned that different tones in their vocalizations meant different things, and this particular sound translated roughly to why. "Because routines help us know what to expect," Kate explained patiently, the same way she explained bedtimes to her 5-year-old nephew. "When we know what comes next, we feel safer and happier." The concept was revolutionary to the Vorthak children. Their species typically raise young through constant challenges and unpredictable tests of strength. The idea that predictability could be comforting rather than weakening was completely foreign to them. Yet within 3 days, all three younglings were eagerly checking the schedule chart each morning, their natural time-keeping instincts adapting to Kate's structured approach. The real breakthrough came when Kate introduced games that transformed their predatory instincts into positive activities. Instead of letting them hunt maintenance droids or terrorize station visitors, she created elaborate treasure hunts throughout their quarters. She would hide small treats or toys, then give them clues to track down their prizes using their natural hunting abilities. "Your target is something round and red, hidden where the light doesn't reach," she would say, watching as they immediately spread out in perfect formation, using their enhanced senses to locate the hidden apple she placed behind the furniture. The games evolved quickly as the younglings mastered each challenge. Kate introduced team objectives that required cooperation instead of competition. Soon, Grim was boosting his smaller brothers to reach high hiding spots, while Talon and Fong worked together to solve puzzles that required multiple hands. Station Security Officer Lieutenant Rodriguez couldn't believe what he was seeing on the surveillance feeds. "Are those the same kids who sent 17 nannies running for their lives?" he asked his partner, watching as the three Vorthak younglings carefully arranged furniture so Kate could reach a broken light fixture. The most shocking transformation happened when Kate witnessed Grim bullying his youngest brother Fong over a toy. In Vorthak culture, such dominance displays were considered normal and even encouraged as preparation for adult hierarchy. Previous caregivers had either ignored the behavior or tried to stop it through punishment and separation. Kate tried something completely different. She sat down with both children and began what she called a feeling talk. "Grim, when you took that toy away from Fong, how do you think it made him feel?" she asked gently. The large youngster looked confused. Feelings weren't typically discussed in Vorthak society beyond basic concepts like anger or fear. Kate could see him struggling to understand the question. "Look at his face," she continued, gesturing toward Fong, who was indeed looking dejected with his shoulders slumped. "See how his eyes look sad? That's because he was enjoying playing with that toy, and now he's hurt that you took it away." Grim studied his little brother's expression intently, his predatory instincts allowing him to read body language with remarkable accuracy. For the first time, he was using those same skills to understand emotions rather than identify weaknesses. "But I'm bigger," Grim protested in his rough approximation of human speech, a skill that was improving daily under Kate's patient coaching. "Being bigger means you're strong enough to protect your brothers, not hurt them," Kate explained. "The strongest people use their power to help others, not to take things away from them." The concept hit Grim like a revelation. Within hours, station security cameras captured footage that would become legendary throughout the galaxy. The largest, most intimidating of the three younglings gently helping his brothers reach items on high shelves, sharing his food without being asked, and even standing protectively between them and perceived threats. By the end of the first week, the transformation was so complete that Ambassador Blackwood hardly recognized his own children. They were still powerful, still clearly apex predators, but now they channeled that strength toward cooperation and care rather than dominance and intimidation. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest gift wasn't their technology or their adaptability. It was their unique ability to see the potential for good in any being and nurture with patience, understanding, and unconditional care. The attack came on day 10 of Kate's assignment, during what should have been a peaceful afternoon of educational activities. She was teaching the three Vorthak younglings about different star systems when the lights in their quarters suddenly flickered and died. Emergency lighting bathed everything in an ominous red glow, and the familiar hum of the station systems fell silent. Kate's training from her maintenance work immediately kicked in. Power outages didn't happen randomly on diplomatic stations. The backup systems had multiple redundancies. This was deliberate. She quickly moved to the communication panel, but found all external channels blocked. They were completely cut off from station security and Ambassador Blackwood. "Stay close to me," she whispered to the three younglings, who had immediately shifted into alert postures at the first sign of trouble. Their predatory instincts were screaming that danger was approaching, but instead of reverting to their old chaotic behavior, they looked to Kate for guidance. The sound of cutting tools echoed from the main entrance. Someone was bypassing the electronic locks with industrial equipment. Kate's mind raced through possibilities. Pirates wouldn't waste time on a diplomatic station unless they had a specific high-value target. The ambassador's children would be worth a fortune to the right buyers, especially given their species' reputation. "Listen carefully," Kate said, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart. "Remember the games we've been playing? The treasure hunts where you had to work together and think smart instead of just being strong? This is like that, but real." Grim growled low in his throat, his claws extending instinctively. In the old days, he would have charged straight at the door, roaring challenges at whatever enemies dared enter their territory. But Kate's training had taught him to think before acting. "What's the plan?" he asked in his improving human speech, the question itself showing how much he'd changed. Vorthak younglings traditionally didn't ask for plans. They simply attacked. Kate quickly surveyed their environment with new eyes, seeing it not as a living space but as a tactical battlefield. The furniture Kate had taught them to arrange neatly could become barriers and weapons. The ventilation shaft she knew from her maintenance work could provide escape routes or ambush points. Most importantly, the three younglings possessed abilities that the attackers wouldn't expect them to use intelligently. "Talon, you're the fastest," she said, pointing to the middle brother. "I need you to get into the ceiling through that maintenance panel and move to position behind whoever comes through that door. Don't attack until I give the signal. Fong, you're the smallest, which means you can hide in places they won't look. Get under that overturned table and wait. If things go bad, your job is to find another way out and get help. Grim, you're with me. We're going to do something they won't expect." The cutting stopped, replaced by the hiss of the door mechanism being forced open. For figures in tactical armor moved into the quarters, their stun weapons raised and ready. They wore the insignia of a mercenary group known for acquiring rare and valuable specimens for wealthy collectors. Target acquisition confirmed. The leader spoke into his comm unit. 3 juvenile Vorthak, as contracted, beginning sedation protocol. The mercenaries had clearly done their research on previous nanny incidents. They expected to face 3 wild predators who would attack mindlessly, making them easy targets for stun weapons. Their plan was simple. Let the younglings exhaust themselves in futile charges, then sedate them while they were disoriented. Instead, they found Kate Mitchell sitting calmly in a chair in the center of the room, with Grim standing protectively beside her, his posture alert but controlled. "Gentlemen," Kate said in the same patient tone she used for bedtime stories, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. These children are under diplomatic protection, and taking them would violate about 12 different galactic treaties." The mercenary leader laughed. "Lady, we're not here to negotiate. Those are Vorthak warspawn, not children. They're worth more than this entire station to the right buyers." "I see," Kate nodded thoughtfully. "So you've studied Vorthak behavior patterns. You know how they hunt, how they react to threats, how they coordinate attacks." "Of course we have," the leader boasted, keeping his weapon trained on Grim. "Pack hunting, territorial aggression, dominance through violence. Textbook predator psychology." Kate smiled. "Then you should know that everything you've learned just became completely useless." At her subtle hand signal, the room exploded into coordinated action. But instead of the wild, chaotic attack the mercenaries expected, they faced something unprecedented. Vorthak younglings using human tactical thinking. Talon dropped from the ceiling directly behind the rear guard, not to kill, but to disarm, His precise strike knocked the stun weapon from the mercenary's hands without seriously injuring him. Simultaneously, Grim moved with calculated precision, using furniture as shields while advancing toward the leader. He wasn't charging blindly. He was methodically cutting off escape routes. The mercenaries, trained to handle wild predators, found themselves completely outmaneuvered by opponents who combined apex predator abilities with human strategic thinking. Ambassador Blackwood's shuttle docked at the diplomatic station 2 hours ahead of schedule, his successful peace negotiations having concluded faster than expected. He was exhausted but relieved, knowing that 3 warring species had finally agreed to a ceasefire that could last for generations. However, his personal anxiety had been eating at him throughout the talks. Every spare moment had been filled with worry about what he might find when he returned to his children. The past 2 weeks had been the longest of his diplomatic career, not because of the complex negotiations, but because he left his 3 younglings in the care of a human maintenance worker with no formal childcare training. He'd received daily reports from station security that everything was proceeding normally, but those reports had been frustratingly vague. No destroyed furniture, no terrorized neighbors, no emergency medical calls. It almost seemed too good to be true. As he approached his quarters, Blackwood braced himself for the usual chaos. He expected to find broken furniture, claw marks on the walls, and Kate either cowering in a corner or having fled like all the others. The ambassador had already prepared apology speeches for what his children might have done during his absence. The door slid open to reveal something that made him freeze, in complete shock. His living quarters were not only intact, but actually cleaner and more organized than when he'd left. Furniture was arranged in neat, functional groupings. The walls were decorated with colorful drawings that appeared to be collaborative artwork between human and Vorthak hands. Soft music played from the entertainment system, and the smell of actual home-cooked food drifted from the kitchen area. But the real miracle was happening in the center of the room. His 3 children sat around a low table, working together on what appeared to be an intricate puzzle. They were taking turns, discussing strategy in clear, articulate sentences, and actually helping each other when someone got stuck. Father, Fong, his youngest, looked up with genuine joy and bounded over to embrace him. The greeting wasn't the usual dominance display or territorial challenge that Vorthak youth typically gave their parents. It was pure affection and excitement. "We missed you," Grim added, his massive form approaching with careful, controlled movements. "Kate taught us about missing people. It's when you feel sad because someone important isn't there, but happy because you know they'll come back." Blackwood stared at his eldest son in amazement. Not only was Grim speaking in complete, complex sentences, but he was describing emotional concepts that most adult Vorthaks struggled to understand. The sophistication of his language and thought processes had advanced by decades in just 2 weeks. "Look what we made for you," Talon announced, racing to retrieve a carefully crafted welcome home banner. The artwork combined Vorthak hunting symbols with human decorative elements, creating something beautiful and entirely unique. Kate emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel and smiling warmly at the ambassador's shocked expression. "Welcome home, Ambassador. I hope the negotiations went well. The children have been looking forward to your return all week." They're speaking," Blackwood stammered, his diplomatic composure completely abandoned. "In full sentences, with emotional vocabulary. How is this possible?" "Children are amazing learners when you give them the right environment and expectations," Kate replied simply. "Your kids aren't different from any others. They just needed someone to believe they could grow beyond their instincts." Over the next hour, Blackwood watched in wonder as his children demonstrated skills that seemed impossible. They solved complex problems through discussion rather than aggression. They shared food without being commanded. They showed concern when he mentioned feeling tired from his journey. Most remarkably, they had learned to read basic text and were working through simple mathematics problems. The transformation was so complete that Blackwood initially wondered if these were the same children he'd left behind. But their physical features were unmistakable, and they remembered every detail of their lives together. Kate had simply unlocked potential that no one knew existed. Word of the miracle began spreading through diplomatic channels within days. The first request came from other Vorthak families who had struggled with violent or uncontrollable offspring. Then came inquiries from the warrior clans of Altair, whose children were considered too aggressive for civilized society. Soon, representatives from dozens of species were contacting human colonies, seeking caregivers who might work similar magic with their own problematic youth. The scientific community was baffled. Evolutionary biologists had insisted that apex predator species were locked into instinctual patterns that couldn't be changed. Child development experts had written entire theories about why certain aggressive species could never develop empathy or cooperation. Kate's success challenged every assumption about nature versus nurture that galactic civilization had accepted as fact. The implications rippled far beyond individual families. Educational systems across the galaxy began reconsidering their approaches to difficult children. Military academies started incorporating human emotional intelligence training. Even the most rigid hierarchical societies began questioning whether their traditional methods of raising youth were actually limiting their potential. Humanity found itself in an unprecedented position. They weren't the strongest species, the smartest, or the most technologically advanced, but they possessed something unique and invaluable: the ability to see potential for growth and goodness in any being, and the patience to nurture that potential with unconditional care and creative teaching methods. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the greatest strength isn't the ability to dominate others, but the wisdom to help them become the best versions of themselves.